Winter's breath hung over the torn grasses of the gift like a pall, a haze of frost that turned every blade of grass into a pale, glass-fine dagger catching the first embers of dawn. Far across the rolling field, the banners of House Bolton flapped blood-red in the chill wind, the flayed man dancing gruesomely against a pallid sky. Ramsay's forces formed a ruthless crescent, pike, shield, row upon implacable row. Behind them, the great hounds whined, already scenting battle and blood. Beyond that mass of meat and iron, Winterfell's distant towers loomed black-gray, the ancestral keep reclaimed by usurpers who had warped it into a charnel house. Jon Snow sat astride his nervous white stallion, long sword sheathed but ready, gloved fingers flexing over the dire wolf pommel. Ghost padded restlessly at his side, scarlet eyes narrowed toward the enemy line. Near Jon, Davos Seaworth tugged his cloak tighter, knuckles showing bone-white beneath the wool. Further behind, the mixed lines of wildlings and northern banners trembled, not from cowardice but from awareness of how few they were. Sansa rode to Jon's left, face half hidden beneath a hood of weir-red wool, but her eyes, icy as the other's night, never left the Bolton standard. Drums beat from Ramsay's command. The sound thrummed through frozen soil, through marrow, through the thin hope that lingered in men's hearts. Jon inhaled cold that burned his lungs, steadying the wild rhythm of his pulse. This is the day Ned Stark's son shapes the north, or loses it forever. Snowflakes whirled, few and delicate at first, as though the sky tested its own sorrow. Jon angled his gaze upward. The heavens lacked clouds enough to loose a storm, yet the flakes multiplied, swirling in sudden, uneasy spirals as though drawn by some deep, invisible vortex. A hush crept over both armies. Even the horses stilled. The wind stuttered. A low rumble, like distant thunder muffled behind mountain ranges, rolled across the plain. Shields rattled. Ramsay's dogs whimpered, tails snapping tight between muscled haunches. Jon's mount reared once, nearly unseating him, before settling with flared nostrils and eyes gone white. Another rumble, closer, yet not thunder. Not hooves, either. It was too deep, too ancient, a sound remembered only in nightmares passed from grandsire to babe. Ramsay's smirk faltered, curiosity fissuring jaggedly into dread. Jon raised a single mailed fist. His army froze. He sought answers in the sky. From some far western quarter of the firmament, a shadow eclipsed the meager sun. First a smear, then a blot, then a monstrous silhouette blotting leagues of dawn light at once. Wings like cathedral vaults unfurled, each stroke a hurricane. A neck like a city wall curved serpentine. The head bore horns sweeping back in blade-sharp arcs. Even at distance, each scale shimmered obsidian sheened with amethyst, a constellation embedded in living midnight. Men forgot to breathe. Some fell to their knees outright. The beast descended, and the air trembled as though the old gods themselves had drawn breath. Only one creature in living memory matched the tales recited at embers of long cold hearths. Balerion, the Black Dread, whose jaws could swallow mammoths whole, whose shadow once drowned entire towns. But Balerion had perished generations ago, bones interred in the crypts beneath the Red Keep. Hadn't he? Davos crossed himself, lips shaping a silent prayer to any god that would listen. Tormund Giantsbane muttered an oath that sounded like fear dressed in bravado. Closer the dragon came, wings dispatching storms. But it was the rider upon that monstrous spine who seized Jon's gaze. A lone figure in dark quilted leather, shoulders cloaked in smoke-gray cape, helm shaped like a snarling dragon's maw. As Balerion stooped at impossible speed, the rider stood in stirrups fashioned of plated Valyrian steel, arms spread as though embracing the battlefield stretched beneath. Bolton ranks lost all semblance of cohesion. Ramsay shouted commands, desperate, shrieking. Arrows knocked, but trembling fingers slipped. Some bowstrings snapped from frost, others from frantic mishandling. The monstrous dragon drew a vast breath. Flame leaked between jaw spines. An instant later, the world ignited. Dragonfire cascaded in a molten torrent, white-hot at its heart. haloed in gold so fierce it turned bodies, iron, and earth to vitreous slag. The front 2 rows of Bolton spears vaporized, shields curling like leaves in a furnace, men reduced to silhouettes wreathed in hell light before collapsing to ash. The roar swallowed every other sound, thunder within thunder, a single eternal note of annihilation. Jon's horse danced back despite his iron grip. Heat blasted across the field, yet the flame never turned toward the stark line. It drew a perfect, terrible arc along Ramsay's men, shaping a river of burning death that seared a path through shield walls, splintering their proud crescent into cinders. Above the inferno, Balerion wheeled, tail thrashing like a siege ram. The colossal wings beat once more, fanning the dragonfire along trenches of Boltons, lighting pitch barrels, igniting flesh and leather. Screams soared skyward only to be drowned in the next thunderous exhale. The dragon alighted with an impact that cratered earth. Soil and snow blasted outward, pelting Jon's face like shrapnel. Balerion's claws, each as long as a warhorse, sank into the charred earth. Ramsay's cavalry, though still mounted and not yet aflame, turned in panicked flight, but their horses refused to approach those talons. Jon watched, stupefied, as the rider dismounted with fluid grace. The figure stripped away the dragonmaw helm, revealing a face of ageless marble. Smooth skin the color of pale dawn, high Valyrian cheekbones, irises molten silver flecked with lavender motes. Silken hair black as starless midnight cascaded to his shoulders. He surveyed the horror like a painter studying a blank canvas newly primed. Then his gaze found Jon. Across smoking ruin and quaking ranks, something passed between the two. Recognition? Destiny? The Dragon Lord inclined his head, almost a courtly nod, before striding forward. The army of the dead Bolton line parted before him, but those men still breathing either fled stumbling or fell face first in prostration. Jon nudged his horse forward. Davos attempted a warning, but words jammed in his throat. Sansa sat rigid, eyes wide and glistening. On the far right, Ramsay Bolton himself dismounted, face streaked with ash and terror now poorly disguised. His savage hounds strained against chains behind him, snarling at the dragon's stench. Ramsay drew his bow, black, recurved, tipped in polished bone. He loosed one arrow at the Dragon Lord. Time slowed, the shaft whistled, end over end, aimed true for the rider's heart. Yet before impact, the stranger lifted a single gloved hand and spoke one crystalline syllable in High Valyrian. The arrow halted midair, tip quivering an inch from his breast, then twisted in place like a compass needle gone mad. With a graceful flick of wrist, he redirected the missile back toward its master. It struck Ramsay's shoulder, driving clean through padded leather and flesh. He staggered, gasping. Blood drenched his fur collar. Again the Dragon Lord spoke. One word, gentle as snowfall, and Ramsay's hounds turned upon him. The animals lunged, teeth flashing. The bastard of Bolton screamed once, twice. Then the hounds tore into their master, fulfilling every cruelty he had ever taught them. Jon's stomach lurched, but he could not look away. Beside him, Tormund spat in grim approval. The stranger approached Ramsay's writhing form. He knelt without touching bloodied snow, observing quietly until silence fell and the hounds slunk back, muzzles red. Then, with a slow turn of gaze, he regarded the remaining Bolton soldiers clustered in trembling knots across the field. Some dropped weapons, others knelt. Few attempted to run, only to be seized by panicked horses or cut down by their own stumbling comrades. Discipline died there, in the shadow of a dragon. Only when the last cries faded did the stranger approach Jon Snow. He halted a pace beyond Ghost's long shadow. The direwolf sniffed, hackles raised, but did not snarl. The Valyrian spoke, voice deep but musical, tinted by some ancient sorrow. I am called Valaros. In tongues forgotten, it means shadow of the fire. He inclined his head a fraction. You are Jon Snow, though a truer name yet rests sleeping in your blood. Jon swallowed. What are you, my lord? Valaros smiled, and in that slight upturn lived the wisdom of centuries. A shepherd, perhaps, guiding flame where it must burn. He glanced back at Balerion, who exhaled smoke that curled into runes upon the air. The Black Dread has returned to cull rot from this realm. First here, then beyond the wall, where cold death gathers. Sansa rode closer, restraining her horse. You knew to come now, how? The old gods whisper in the weirwood's veins. The new gods gossip upon cathedral spires. But dragons, they dream, and I... Listen. Valaros's eyes shone. There is little time. The Night King marches. He will not pause for petty tyrants like Ramsay Bolton, though their fall is necessary. Jon's breath smoked. The Night King, even speaking the name chilled more than the wind. As the wall stands, he bides, but ice longs to break stone and soon will. Valaros swept an arm eastward, toward where dawn had regained nerve, painting clouds rose and violet beyond Winterfell's ragged outline. Gather Northmen, mend banners torn by pride. When the horn of winter sounds, you must be ready. Jon stared at the smoldering field, at the blackened corpses, at the molten pits where men and pikes had melted together. Then at the dragon waiting like an ebon mountain come alive. Could even such a beast contend with the legends from beyond the wall? He thought of Hardhome, of the blue eyes in darkness, of swords shattering like glass. Valaros seemed to read the tremor in Jon's chest. Valerion's fire was forged in old Valyria, when dragons were young and cruel. Its heat can scorch shadows from the deepest night. Yet flame alone is not enough. Ice can smother flame if the heart that wields it falters. Jon met the stranger's gaze. Then guide us. I shall, until your own blood answers. Valaros's expression softened, almost paternal. Ask no more for now. Rally your houses. Winterfell must open its gates to free folk, to knights, to crows, to every breathing soul unafraid to stand before cold oblivion. Ghost brushed against Jon's boot, whining low. Jon exhaled, a plume of steam. He turned to Davos and Tormund. Sound the horns. Take the field. Gather survivors and prisoners, if any live. His voice cracked like a frostbitten branch but grew stronger. Winterfell falls today, not to a flayed man but to those who fought for the living. Davos nodded, face paler than snow yet resolute. Tormund grinned wolfishly, already calling commands in the guttural rolling tongue of the free folk. The battered Stark line surged forward with renewed purpose, charging through smoldering gaps. Sansa dismounted, stepping toward Valaros. You saved the North, she said, voice trembling between accusation and awe. Why? What debt do you owe us? Valaros studied her, head tilted. I owe only the realm, lady, its past, its future. And there is a debt on the other side of winter's door, one even dragons must pay. A shadow older than houses clutching for survival. I will not let the world burn in frost. He replaced his helm, transforming once more into Iron Dragon visage. Balerion bowed colossal neck. Valaros mounted in a fluid motion, cloak swirling like smoke. To Jon he called, when the moon is swallowed by wolf's blood and storms howl blue, seek me at the heart tree in Winterfell's godswood. With that riddle lingering, he patted obsidian-scaled hide. Balerion beat wings. Wind exploded outward, extinguishing flames that still licked charred timber. Ash swirled in a maelstrom, momentarily blotting the living from sight. When it cleared, Balerion soared high, a black star ascending toward cloud-scraped zenith, leaving only molten footprints cooling in a ravaged field. Jon stood amid ruin, heart thunderous. Around him, his army advanced into broken ranks, capturing terrified Bolton men, some begging for mercy, others too charred to speak. Free folk and Northmen alike fled before the heat-slick ground Balerion had rent, forging paths of black glass that gleamed like mirrors to another world. Across the way, Ramsay's banner still fluttered, though its pole leaned charred and half-melted. Jon approached it on foot. He sliced the canvas free. It drifted down, ember glowing at edges before damp snow hissed it dead. Ghost lifted muzzle to the sky in a ghost-long howl that scattered crows from barren trees. Within Winterfell's battered halls, hours later, Torches sputtered and men shuffled wounded through corridors scarred by Ramsay's tyranny. Jon knelt by a hearth in the great hall, now cleared of flayed bodies and grotesque trophies, rolling parchment maps across a table scarred by knife gouges. Beside him, Davos traced routes to the Night Fort, to Last Hearth, to Eastwatch, marking supply caches and mustering points. Sansa directed maids to strip bloody banners, drape stark gray direwolf sigils anew. Outside, dusk crawled over recaptured walls. The temperature had dropped again, crisp and cutting, as though the world dared to match cruelty with new resolve. Jon rubbed eyes gritty with soot and no sleep. He remembered Valaros's words, wolf's blood moon, storm's howling blue. He heard again Hardhome's screams, remembered the icy grip of a White's fingers on his throat. Sansa joined him, lips tight but eyes shining with fierce life. "They're calling Balerion a ghost of vengeance," she whispered. "They say the old gods sent him." Jon shook his head. "Old or new, I know only that we cannot rely on him alone. The Night King won't fear a dragon he's never seen." He rolled shoulders stiff with days-old bruising. "We need every house. We need Valyrian steel, dragonglass, things we can lift ourselves." Sansa's gaze drifted to the high rafters. "Do you trust this Valaros?" "I trust what I saw. A rider who could have turned that fire on us and didn't." Jon pushed stray hair from his eyes. "But power like his serves only itself unless purpose guides it." He felt the memory of Regal and Viserion wings in his dreams, visions half-remembered of a mother he hardly knew and a father cloaked in prophecy. "And he believes I have a purpose. I don't know if I fear that more than the Night King." Footsteps echoed. Tormund strode in, carrying a barrel under one arm and grinning through soot-streaked beard. "Ale," he boomed, "to wash away ash stuck in my teeth." He set it down with a thunk, startling a raven perched on a crossbeam overhead. "Bolton whelps are in chains. Some of yours want blood. Some want mercy. What say you, Crow?" "Tomorrow we hold judgment," Jon replied. "Tonight we rest and heal." Tormund popped a cork with his teeth and spat it into the fire. Flame flared blue. He poured 3 cups, shoving one to Jon, one to Sansa. "To damn big black lizard," he toasted. Jon raised his mug, though he scarcely tasted the brew. His mind roamed the sky, chasing a shadow bigger than any hope yet dared. Midnight shrouded Winterfell when Jon crossed the yard toward the Godswood. Snow fell again, thin, deliberate flakes drifting like faded embers. Ghost paced ahead, sniffing the air. Torches flickered in sconces along stone walls, painting the inner ward in restless orange pools. At the Weirwood's clearing, the heart tree glowed ghost white, red leaves fluttering. The carved face wept sap like crimson tears under moonlight. Jon paused at its roots, boots crunching snow, unsure whether he came to pray or to seek the riddles of destiny. Then he felt it, a hum through bone and blood, vibration of wings or of heartbeats stretching back to kingdoms drowned in time. He turned. Valaros leaned against a moss-draped stone, half hidden by shadows. He removed his helm, silver eyes catching the Weirwood's faint luminescence. "You came," he said. Jon approached. "You said the moon would be swallowed, but the moon is full." Valaros's gaze lifted. Clouds had gathered thick, quickening across the sky like pack wolves. They devoured argent light, cloaking the world in gray. In moments, only darkness remained overhead, and the gods would breathe silence broken only by distant keening wind. "The wolf's blood moon," Valaros murmured. "Test of courage." He gestured to the heart tree. "Kneel, Jon Snow, so Stark and Targaryen both may listen." Jon hesitated. Ghost sat, watching warily. Jon sank to knees chilled by snow, palms pressed into the frozen earth. Valaros stepped behind him, voice low. "Feel the roots of this tree. They stretch beneath every hill, every river, even under the wall. They drink whisperings of past and future." He laid a single fingertip upon Jon's crown. "Hear them." Jon closed his eyes. At first only silence and the swirl of his own turbulent blood. Then, faint, like whispers behind doors' voices, a woman's scream of agony. the cry of a babe, a man's promise in a tower of fallen petals. Then forging steel, dragons roaring, cheers of crowds, ice cracking, horns crying 3 times in the night. A myriad tapestry of memory and portent knotted through centuries. Fire and ice met in him. He gasped, eyes snapping open, vapor plumed from parted lips. Valaros crouched, silver gaze piercing. Dragon flame flows through you, John. It will answer only when claimed, and only for the living. His tone hardened, like tempered steel. But the dead march. The wall alone cannot hold. Even Balerion can only burn what stands before him. The Night King rides storms of endless winter. He must be confronted at the hour his power is weakest. John's voice was raw. When is that? When the dead have come south enough to feel the heartfire in the stones. When the wall cries out, and the 3 lies of men are broken. Valaros rose. Soon, Ghost growled. John stood, swaying. The North will follow me, he rasped. But we cannot fight alone. Daenerys Targaryen sails for Westeros with her own dragons, if the tales are true. A flicker of caution crossed Valaros's visage. She bears the Stormborn's wrath and the Conqueror's pride. Dragons are not tools, Jon Snow. They are kin, bound by blood older than kingdoms. You will need more than beasts. You'll need unity. Jon clenched fists, felt where frost had cracked the leather over knuckles. How? Valaros smiled, faint as new frost. By remembering that the shield that guards the realms of men is not a wall of ice, he said, stepping backward into shadows, but a wall of souls willing to stand together. He donned his helm again, face disappearing behind onyx fangs. A great gust stirred snow, and Jon realized with shock that Balerion crouched behind the weirwood, as silent as mountains. How a beast so massive moved unnoticed terrified him more than its fire. Valaros mounted, and in a single bound, the dragon rose above treetops. Snow spiraled. Moonlight struggled through clouds to catch the sweep of wings before darkness reclaimed them. Jon stood alone beneath the heart tree, the red sap glistening like fresh blood upon its face. He felt the weight of worlds he never asked to inherit press upon him. Yet, beneath dread, another emotion unfurled. Purpose, stubborn, iron-rooted purpose. He whispered a promise to the weirwood and to whatever gods still listened. I will not fail the Livy. No, they. Ghost pressed warm fur to his thigh. Together they turned back toward Winterfell's stone torches flickering against gathering dark, ready to summon every banner, every sword, every fragile breath of hope into a fire to meet the coming night. Beyond the wall, in an empire of silence and frost, the Night King stood upon a ridge of blue-white crystal, robes of noon ice shifting in windless air. His eyes blazed cerulean. Below, an army of the dead sprawled across frozen valleys. Tens of thousands of corpses in rusted mail, white stitched of wolf, bear, and giant, white spiders as large as horses clicking mandibles into starlit night. He lifted one clawed hand. The clouds above split in crackling arcs of pale lightning, revealing the full moon, then swallowed it whole behind writhing shadows. The Night King listened to the silence after thunder. Somewhere far to the south, a wall of fire had roared, and he felt it sting even here, a twinge in the emptiness where life once beat. Above him, an ice worm unfurled ragged wings, shrieking. The Night King turned eyes like shattering glaciers toward the south and began to walk. Every corpse followed. Morning bled across the north, soft and bruised. At Winterfell, ravens launched into cold wind bearing messages sealed with dire wolf wax, summons to houses carving meager harvests from snow-choked valleys. Manderley, Glover, Mormont, Hornwood, Reed. Word flew further, past White Harbor's frosted wharves, across the Neck and the Twins, down King's Road now half forgotten under drifting snow. Council fires were lit in every hall. Old grudges stirred, but so too did the memory of ancient oaths. The banners of the North would ride. John Smiths scoured Winterfell's crypts and armories for swords of Valyrian steel, few and treasured. Glass candles cracked as maesters experimented with obsidian from Dragonstone shipments long and used. In distant Old Town, Samwell Tarly pored through crumbling scrolls, searching for lost secrets of dragon glass and flame. And high above, Valaros and the Black Dread winged lonely circuits over mountain passes, over the ghost forests of Skagos, over the shattered fist of the first men where ravens perched upon cairns of ice. Wherever they flew, watchers felt both wonder and fear, as though the world dreamt again of empire and ruin. Yet even a dragon's shadow could not cover two continents at once. As the days steeped deeper into winter, snows thickened, winds sharpened, and the wall, vast, white, eternal, groaned under pressure of time and enemy. At Eastwatch, men peered into swirling blizzards and swore they saw shapes moving like mountains advancing, glacial, unstoppable. One dawn, 3 crows arrived at Winterfell, cloaks ragged, faces carved by frostbite. They knelt before Jon in the great hall, voice tight with exhaustion. "We sighted them," the leader said, eyes wild. "South of Hardhome, 10,000, maybe more, and among them something vast, an ice dragon." Jon's pulse hammered. Sansa clasped his forearm, nails digging. Tormund scowled. "Ice dragon? Children's tales." The crow shook his head. "Its breath is death," he whispered, "and it carries winter on its wings." Jon dismissed the hall, gathering his captains around the long table. Plans formed like frost patterns, fragile, intricate, necessary. Some demanded retreat to Moat Cailin, to narrow the dead's approach. Others clamored to march north, meet the enemy before the wall. But Jon remembered Hardhome, remembered men frozen to statues, remembered being moments from death before the Night King's chilling gaze. "We defend the living here," he said. "Winterfell is heart and fire. It must beat." Davos spoke softly. "And what of Valaros? Will he come when called?" Jon looked to windows where pale sun struggled. "He will," he replied, voice quiet but iron. "And we'll be ready to fight beside him, not behind him." That night, as war councils dissolved into exhaustion, Jon returned to the ramparts. He watched the northern horizon, lit faintly by Aurora's glimmer, and imagined beyond those hills, the Night King's army advancing step by silent step. An owl hooted from the godswood. A shiver slid down Jon's spine. He whispered to the wind, "Father, guide me. Mother, strengthen me. Brother, sister, keep the old words." Ghost leaned warm against his hip. Far off, a sound rose. A long, distant, mournful horn call. Not the watch's 3 blasts, but deeper, older, resonating through the marrow of the earth. Jon gripped the icy parapet. The war for the dawn had begun. Days bled into weeks. Snowstorms hammered the north with fury that felt deliberate, as though winter itself rallied to the Night King's banner. Supply trains faltered. Fields lay buried. Yet Winterfell thrummed with preparation. Fletchers crafting arrows laced with obsidian shards. Masons strengthening battlements. Children sewing bandages by candlelight. Swords rang against shields in yard drills. Wildlings learned disciplined shield walls. Knights from White Harbor adapted to fluid skirmishes taught by free folk. Women who once tended looms practiced spear thrusts under the stern oversight of Lyanna Mormont, whose command voice cut like steel. At twilight's edge one brittle evening, the watchman atop the broken tower shouted. Jon ascended the spiral stairs 2 at a time. From the turret he beheld a sight both tremendous and terrifying. Silhouettes of dragons, plural, sweeping across the sinking sun. But these were not Balerion's infinite wings. They were smaller, lean, bronze, and emerald. Behind them trailed a fleet of sails hugging the coast, banners of a black-red dragon rippling. Daenerys Stormborn had arrived. Her army poured into the snow-clogged grounds. Unsullied in perfect phalanx, Dothraki screamers testing scythes against frost-brittle wind, captains bearing the standard of House Targaryen resurrected. At their front rode a queen with hair like melted silver, eyes pale purple, cloak clasped with 3-headed dragon wrought in dark steel. Jon descended with heartbeat like a war drum. Their meeting in Winterfell's courtyard crackled with more tension than the sky's crack ice vault above. She extended gloved hand. I believe dragons would be enough to claim the 7 kingdoms, she said. But when whispers reached Marine of an army of ice, of a dead dragon reborn in the north, I sailed not for crown but for war. Jon clasped her forearm. Then we stand together, fire and blood to shield the living. He gestured to the ramparts. Winterfell is yours to command beside me. She looked past him to the battlements, where tired men in patched cloaks stared in awe. Many hearts beat here, Daenerys said softly. They will not fail. Yet in the shadow of her words, tension coiled. For above them, twin dragons circled, Drogon and Rhaegal, snarling at scents of cold rot carried on far winds. Somewhere beyond those winds, Balerion too flew, forging his own path. When dragons met, would they embrace as kin or clash? Jon led Daenerys through stone corridors to the war room. Flames danced in iron braziers. Velaros stood already inside, cloak dripping snowmelt, silver eyes flicking to the Dragon Queen. The air thickened, as though 2 storms collided unseen. Daenerys's brows arched. You helm the beast they call Black Dread. I thought his bones dust in King's Landing. Velaros inclined head. Bones remember fire. He approached, and for a heartbeat Jon feared sparks would fly. Your ancestors forged an empire on Dragonback. But empire is ash in the face of oblivion. Will you temper your fire with purpose? Daenerys Stormborn? Her chin lifted. I am blood of the dragon. Fire is my birthright. And your burden, Velaros replied. See it wielded wisely. Jon placed palms flat on the table for stalling argument. The Night King nears. Balerion, Drogon, Rhaegal, together they may turn the tide. But we must lure the dead into ground of our choosing. Davos traced lines on parchment. Here, he said, tapping a valley north of Winterfell where an old ring fort once stood. Natural choke point, space enough for dragons above, for cavalry flanks, for archers on ridges. We salt the field with dragonglass stakes. The dead won't retreat. They'll press through and break themselves. Velaros eyed the map. The Night King will be drawn to power. He will want the Dragon Queen's fire extinguished and the wolf's heart frozen. He will come. His voice dipped, barely audible. And ice will meet flame in final dance. Daenerys extended a fingertip to the map's heart. Then here the dead shall fall. Outside, snow continued to fall, muffling the world, as though nature itself held breath before the storm of storms. The chosen valley, called Black Reach by local shepherds, yawned between 2 steep ridges lined with ancient pines shear-edged by winter winds. Frozen streams carved treacherous veins beneath patchy snow. Standing stones crowned a low knoll at the center, rumored burial markers of the first men. To the north, a narrow defile opened upon featureless tundra stretching toward the wall. Weeks passed in frantic toil. Thousands labored to fortify the valley. Unsullied erected palisades of oak braced by dragonglass. Northmen mined obsidian shards from Dane cliff quarries, forging arrowheads, spear tips, caltrops. Wildlings roped nets of boiled leather studded with shards, to be dropped upon charging wights. Catapults, fashioned of pine and iron, were stocked with clay pots of wildfire transported in utmost secrecy from King's Landing's lowest vaults by brave smugglers. Above all, dragons soared, drilling in sweeping arcs directed by crack-voiced commanders. Balerion often flew alone, his passing casting entire camps into hush. Yet there were moments when Drogon or Rhaegal spotted him across bruised horizons. Then sky thundered with roars older than language, and men below marveled or trembled, unsure if those titans would clash. Immunals of roosting were built upon ridges, stone platforms wide enough for monstrous talons, ringed by burning braziers to help dragons mark friendly ground amid swirling snow. On the eve of the battle foretold, Jon stood upon the northern ridge, studying sunset. The sky burned crimson, clouds like open wounds. At his side, Daenerys pressed a hand to Drogon's warm scales, face half-lit by fading light. Velaros leaned against a monolith, silent. As the last sliver of sun sank, horns blew thrice from watchtowers. Shadows unfurled along tundra's edge. The army of the dead, marching without song, without torch, without soul. Only the grinding hush of snow compressed beneath thousands of feet. Jon felt his heart drum rapid cadence. He looked at Velaros. The Dragonlord's expression was unreadable behind helm. Daenerys swung onto Drogon's back with warrior's grace. Jon clasped the pommel of Longclaw, drawing it. The Valyrian steel glinted pale blue in gathering gloom. Across the valley, torches flared. Shields locked. Every man, woman, and child able to wield blade or bow took places hammered into muscle memory. The Night King appeared atop ridgeline, riding an ice WRM with wings like shattered glass. His eyes, cold twin stars, fixed upon Jon, upon Daenerys, upon Velaros. He raised a spear forged from midnight ice, and the dead screamed without throats, a cacophony of muffled despair that rattled bones themselves. Jon lifted his sword high, his voice, ragged but firm, carried along the line. For the living! And somewhere behind him, bells rang, Winterfell's bells, calling ghosts of every Stark buried deep to lend silent strength. The first rank of whites surged. Dragons leapt skyward. Fire met ice, and the world, for a breathless moment, stood poised upon the edge of dreams and endings. To be continued. Drab pre-dawn light seeped into Blackreach like water through cracked stone, tinting the sky the pallid gray of old bones. A brittle crust of frost covered every surface. The freshly raised palisades, the dragonglass-tipped stakes jutting like forest teeth, even the leather cuirasses of the unsullied standing watch. Breath fogged from the lips of 1,000 sleepless soldiers, coiling upward to join a low mist that clung to the valley floor. Somewhere distant, a raven croaked 3 hollow notes and fell silent, as though the air itself dared not disturb what waited just beyond the northern ridge. Jon Snow stood beneath a tattered canvas awning pitched beside the command tent, eyes fixed on the half-lit horizon. A hood of snow-damp wolf fur framed his face. His hair clung in inky strands to temples slick with cold sweat. He had not slept. How could he? Every flicker of torch outside his tent had flared into visions. Wraiths advancing, friends falling, the Night King's stare boring through helmet and bone. Dawn should have been a reprieve. Instead, it felt like a final tightening of the noose. Behind him, the command tent rustled. Davos Seaworth emerged, tugging gloves around fingers stiff with chill. He carried a steaming cup of pine needle tea, thin, bitter, but warm, and pressed it into Jon's gauntlet hands without a word. They drank in silence, listening to the creak of wood as the palisades settled, to the faint mutter of sentries murmuring prayers, to the hiss of smiths stoking coals in makeshift forges where they heat-set obsidian points into arrow shafts. Jon exhaled. How many hours? 2, maybe 3 before full light? Davos replied, voice a low rasp. That'll be the coldest stretch. If the Night King means to break us swiftly, he'll come before the sun can crest. He lifted his gaze to the ridgeline. But I've a feeling he'll let the day rise, so we can see exactly what walks toward us. Jon set the empty cup on a barrel rim crusted with hoarfrost. Then we meet him in daylight. Our archers need it. Our dragons, too. He flexed numb fingers. Is everyone in position? Rotations changed an hour ago. Wildlings on the east ridge, Mormont pikemen in the center trenches, unsullied on the reinforced line by the ring fort ruins. Dothraki are restless, but Yora's keeping them from charging at shadows. Davos's mouth quirked. Tormund's complaining there's no decent mead. Says he'll drink his own piss if it'll warm his guts. Jon allowed a thin smile. Leave him his comforts. We'll all need them by nightfall. Snowflakes drifted, glinting pale gold where braziers guttered along the trench parapets. Beyond, the valley rolled down to a broad flat where dragonglass stakes bristled like the spines of a slain leviathan. Past that, the northern approach narrowed to a gulch, just wide enough for columns of whites to bottleneck. If the plan held, dragons would scourge that choke point, unsullied spears would hold the center, and the Northmen would hammer the flanks. And if the plan unraveled, Jon pushed thought of that abyss away. Hoofbeats crunched through snow behind them. Sansa Stark rode up on a dun mare, cloak of blue-gray wool snapped by the wind. A circlet of black iron crowned her red hair. Her cheeks, flushed by the cold, made the scars at her wrists seem whiter. She dismounted before the stall could still, boots thudding on icy earth. "Tyrion wishes to see the lines again," she said, voice sharp with fatigue and urgency. "He's convinced we can use the valley's echo to carry commands, if we position signal horns on both ridges." Jon rubbed his eyes. "Tell him to do it. Any advantage is worth the effort." Sansa nodded but did not turn away. Her gaze searched his, weighing the pall beneath his eyes, the tremor in his jaw. "You've eaten nothing since yesterday." "We all eat after," Jon said, too quickly. He reached for her gloved hand. "Stay within the ring fort when it begins. The stones are thick. You'll have some measure of shelter." Her fingers squeezed his. "I won't hide while the North fights. A commander's place is where decisions matter," Jon responded. "Inside those walls, you'll see the battlefield without getting torn apart by it. And your voice," he held her gaze, "may keep hearts from faltering when mine cannot be heard." For a heartbeat, sibling argument glinted in her eyes. Then she exhaled through her nose, nodded curtly, and swung back into the saddle. As she rode off toward the ridgeline, the first distant horn call echoed across the valley. One short, two long. Scouts signaling movement. Not whites, dragons. Jon's heartbeat surged. He turned southward. Two shadows loomed against the paling sky. Drogon and Regal gliding in tandem, wings catching updrafts shimmering off the valley. Their silhouettes were awe-inspiring, but they carried a nervous energy. Tails twitching, angled flight unpredictable. The dragons banked along the eastern ridge, then circled downward to perch upon their stone roosts, snorting steam thick as forged smoke. Moments later Daenerys appeared, striding across the trampled snow, cloak of black leather splitting behind her like torn night. She wore no crown, only a half-serrated gorget shaped like dragon wings. Frost garnished her silver hair. Tyrion trotted beside her. Behind them padded Missandei, who whispered updates to Grey Worm, already armored head to toe and speaking in hushed Balerion with his lieutenants. Daenerys reached Jon and Davos, eyes bright. Drogon senses something, perhaps a storm building beyond the ridge. Jon braced against a gust that knifed between stakes and parapets. Not weather, anticipation. They smell the dead. He glanced over her shoulder to Regal, green scales pulsing with inner light as the dragon shuddered. They'll need to conserve flame until the first charge breaks. Tyrion stamped numb feet, scanning the valley. "I used to think the Blackwater the largest battlefield I'd ever witness. Now that seems a tavern brawl by comparison." He met Jon's eye. "Valaros, out scouting," Daenerys said before Jon could answer. "He rides Balerion high above the cloud ceiling, watching the armies march. When he returns, he'll bring word of numbers." "Numbers seem irrelevant at a point," Tyrion muttered. 10, 20, 30,000 dead. They don't eat, don't tire, don't fear. They break under flame, Jon said. He felt the weight of Longclaw at his hip and drew it partially, letting the Valyrian steel taste morning air. Blade and obsidian teeth across the field, all designed to buy time for dragons to do what only dragons could. A ripple of commotion swept the western ridge. Figures pointed skyward. Jon followed their gesture, and there, emerging from cloud cover like a living fragment of night, Balerion descended. Enormous wings spanned horizons. Each stroke sent spirals of crystallized vapor streaming off obsidian edges. Frost cracked underfoot as wind hammered the camp. Men ducked or fell flat. Horses screamed and bolted. Yet Jon felt a surge of fierce reassurance. The ancient dread had returned to their cause. Balerion beat wings once more and drifted onto a broad plateau behind the ring fort. Snow clouds billowed, swirling around the beast like incense at a sacred rite. Valaros dismounted with habitual grace, cloak whipping. He crossed ground strewn with dragonglass caltrops as though they were rose petals. Jon, Daenerys, Davos, and Tyrion met him partway. Valaros's eyes, luminous silver, reflected flickers of torchlight. "They come," he said without preamble. 2 hours march. 10 legions worth, perhaps more, hard to count when bodies collapse atop bodies in transit. The Night King rides the Ice Wyrm at their vanguard. Grey Worm's jaw tightened. "How many giants?" "20 by my count," Valaros replied. "A pair of undead mammoths." And behind, something else. Large, winged, glimmering blue. His gaze rode. An ice dragon older than memory, not Viserian's corpse. This one hatched in the cold waste centuries before Valeria's rise. Its name was lost when the world forgot to fear it. Dread crept along Jon's spine, cold as the air. "Can our three stand against it?" Valaros turned to Regal and Drogon, who huffed plumes of white fire. "Perhaps. Balerian's flame will burn hotter than frost. But if that beast's breath is truly winter-made substance, contact could shatter scales." He faced Daenerys. "We must lure it low, force it into ground fight, where numbers and spear formations can divert it while dragons strike from above." Daenerys' expression hardened. "And the Night King?" Valaros's voice dropped. "He is the spear point. Remove him, the dead will falter. But he will guard himself with cold sorcery and with that Wyrm. Jon must find a path through his guard." Jon blinked. "Why me?" "Blood calls blood," Valaros murmured. "Targaryen fire answers to you as much as to her." A slight incline of head toward Daenerys. "And the Night King recognizes foes of destiny." Tyrion rubbed brow. "Destiny seldom shows her cards so plainly. Still, best not argue with the man who commands a walking volcano." Trumpets cut short further debate. 3 bright blasts from Eastern Ridge. Scouts sped down slope, fur cloaks snapping. One called out, voice ragged, "Movement on the North Pass. We see them, the dead." A hush rippled across thousands. Torches dimmed. Every ear bent toward the ridge, as though night itself inhaled. Jon stepped forward, voice stern. "Positions." Grey Worm barked Valyrian cadence. Unsullied ranks pivoted, shields interlocking. Mormont pikemen lowered broadheads into trenches grooved to channel charging whites onto stake beds. Dothraki riders peeled off along western flank, where packed snow would allow swift flanking maneuvers once daylight crested. Wildlings gathered ripped shields and axes, forming irregular but fierce wedge formations behind dragonglass pike lines. High on the ridge, archers fitted obsidian-tipped arrows to sinew strings. Giant crossbows, scorpions scavenged from old Lannister siege trains, swiveled toward the pass, each bolt heavy as a fence post and tipped with twisted black glass. Jon clambered the southern parapet of the ring fort, Sansa's presence steady at his shoulder. The valley spread before them, a white canvas upon which destiny would paint in blood and flame. Sunlight tried to crack the horizon but remained trapped behind iron-gray cloud, leaving the land bathed in dim silver. From the north, a swelling roar rose, a sound like an avalanche grinding mountains to dust, ranged across impossible breadth. Shapes emerged. First a ragged vanguard of skeletal outriders, bones rimed in frost, empty sockets glowing faint saucer blue. Then ranks of armored dead, shields frozen to fleshless forearms, mail half-rotted. They marched in uncanny unison, feet thudding in mute rhythm, as if one dark will controlled every tendon. Interspersed, pale giants lumbered, their once brown fur now hoar-flecked gray, eyes blazing the same baleful fire. Behind them, the Ice Wyrm loomed, wings folded like razor shards, serpentine neck arched, and astride its broad back the Night King. He wore no helm. Shards of ice jutted like a crown from his brow. His breastplate gleamed crystal blue, ribbed in patterns reminiscent of prisoned frost. He gripped a spear of black ice honed to a blade at one end, wickedly hooked at the other. He surveyed the valley with calm, predatory stillness, then smiled, a thin rictus of triumph as though the field already lay in silent graves. Jon felt the weight of that gaze strike like sleet, yet he straightened, raising Longclaw. On the opposite ridge, Daenerys vaulted astride Drogon, scales rippling under tight leather, eyes burning violet. Valaros mounted Balerion, silhouette merging into dragon's nape until rider and beast seemed a single being of living night. Horns blared deep thrice. Answering horns called along the ridges. The ground quivered beneath thousands stamping in renewed resolve. Upon the pass, the first white let out a silent scream and charged. The Battle of Blackreach began. Arrows loosed in black waves, high arcs silvered by the pale light. Obsidian points hissed through air, finding skeleton, rotten flesh, crystalline breastplates. Dead shattered like brittle glass. Splinters of bone peppered snow. Yet for each that fell, 3 more advanced, climbing over broken comrades with mindless persistence. Unsullied phalanx locked shields and braced spears. The collision of armies rang like iron bells. Obsidian through ribcage, shield rim against skull, frost-numb hands grappling spear shafts slick with frozen ichor. John watched lines ripple but hold. Behind them, dragonglass stakes skewered the front wave, whites impaled and still clawing forward until lack of limbs halted progress. From the sky descended Balerion. The black dread inhaled, throat bulging like a furnace filled to bursting. Flame, deep crimson at core, ringed by sun-white, poured in a torrent along the choke, incinerating hundreds in one sweeping stroke. Snow vaporized instantaneously, leaving pockets of boiling mud that cooled to glass. The Night King's spear jutted in response. He raised one gauntlet hand. A halo of blue radiance shimmered, and for a heartbeat, Balerion's fire splashed against invisible barrier, sheeting off in harmless tongues that steamed and dissipated. The Night King did not flinch. Above him, an unearthly shriek split the air. The ice WYRM launched upward, wings unfurling with jagged cracks. Frost-laden wind followed its ascent, flurries swirling. It climbed fast, angling toward Drogon and Regal circling to flank. Its breast shone like glazed porcelain, its eyes twin glacial suns. From its throat erupted a beam of pale blue, liquid winter itself. The stream struck Drogon's left wingtip. Scales flashed white, cracking frost twisting along membrane. Drogon roared in pain, banking away. Daenerys clutched saddle spikes, knuckles blanching.
Raigal dove, jaws open.
Emerald flame jetted toward the ice WRM's exposed flank. At contact, fire hissed, turning to steam and snow, cancelled by cold so absolute it swallowed heat. Yet the WRM's flight faltered, frost along its wing fracturing under rapid expansion. It screeched, turning its fury upon Regal, but the green dragon flitted aside. Below, Jon descended from parapet, shouting to signal runners. Catapults, fire! Crews heaved against rope tension. Clay pots of wildfire, sickly green viscous fluid, launched skyward, tumbling end over end. They exploded amidst white ranks, phosphorescent fire washing across undead forms, burning even the snow around them. Screams erupted. No, not screams. Air shuddering as trapped gases and corpses burst like overripe fruit. Twisted shadows staggered, a light collapsing into molten sludge that quickly cooled. Yet still they came. A horn blast, one long rising. Jon spun. Giants. 3 undead giants leapt the dragonglass stakes, swinging rotted tree trunks as clubs. One crashed into unsullied line, sending shields flying. Grey Worm rallied, spear reversing to drive an obsidian blade beneath the giant's sternum. The weapon bit deep, black frost spread. The giant howled, low guttural, then toppled, flattening 2 rankers. Obsidian did its work. The creature's glow folded inward and died. Jon sprinted from Ringfort Gate, Ghost bounding at his heels. Tormund thundered past with a knot of free folk, axes upraised. They swarmed the second giant, hacking at ankles until tendons snapped. It crashed to knees just as a scorpion bolt slammed from ridge top through its skull, pinning it to ground like a monstrous insect. Steam hissed from puncture. Blue eyes faded. The third giant plowed toward the trenches, where Mormont pikemen braced. Lyanna Mormont herself, tiny figure armored in chain and bearskin, stood upon a mound, shouting the house words, "Here we stand," and leapt with dragonglass spear into path of a swinging trunk. The blow hurled her aside. She tumbled, coughing blood. Jon's vision tunneled, but before he could reach her, the giant jerked. A Valyrian steel axe buried in its spine. Jorah Mormont, grim resolve etched on weathered face. The giant reached back, snagging him, but Jorah twisted the axe, splitting frozen vertebrae. Giant collapsed atop him. Silence swallowed the moment. Jon arrived, heaving the heavy limb enough for Jorah to crawl free, battered but alive. Lyanna staggered upright, nose bleeding, refusing aid. Bear Island Field's warriors, not children, she spat, grabbing another spear. Overhead, the sky turned a dim shade of violet as sun climbed behind cloud, diffusing light across battlefield. The ice WRM dove again, scattering archers with a torrent of winter breath that flash-froze wooden towers into brittle sculptures. One cracked, toppling in shards. Archers leapt, some shattering on impact. Jon's heart lurched, but then Valaros wheeled Balerion into intercept path. The ancient dragon's throat glowed incandescent, anvil red. Flame burst. No mere fire, but magma, thick and roiling. It struck the ice WRM square in the breast. For an instant flame and frost wrestled like primal gods. The air between them rippled, steam screaming into cloud. The ice WRM shrieked, scales fracturing like shattered mirrors. Yet, still it lived. It lurched sideways, careened above ridgeline, gouging gouges with clawed wingtips. Chunks of ice body fell, transfixed by molten slag, then crystallized midair. Valaros urged Balerion after the wounded WRM, but before they could close, a spear of hard blue energy launched upward, hurled by the Night King. It tore through sky, trailing a comet tail of frostfire. Valaros pulled hard. Balerion banked, but the spear clipped wing trailing edge. A shockwave thundered. Balerion roared. Black blood spattered snow like hot oil. The colossal beast faltered, losing altitude before catching self with furious wing beats. Valaros pressed hand to dragon's hide, murmur lost in wind. Jon watched from ground, senses burning. He knew the ice WRM had to fall before Balerion sustained worse. He scanned for Regal and Drogon. They reascended, circling to regroup. He sprinted toward a scorpion emplacement, where Gendry labored with two smiths, resetting a fresh bolt. Aim for the WRM, Jon shouted. Gendry wiped soot from brow, muscles straining. Need distraction. It's flying high. Jon glanced at Davos, who had joined them. If the WRM dives again, time your shot for when it pulls up. Use the valley's edge. Wait for my signal. Davos nodded grimly. Below, Whites resumed relentless push. The trenches filled with twitching bodies. Over them crawled more. Obsidian barriers clogged with carcasses until they formed ramps for fresh attackers. Jon's throat tightened. We need the Dothraki now, he told Davos. Signal them to sweep the flank. Cut into the armies before they reach second line. Davos sprinted toward Hornpost. Jon found Sansa atop Ringfort parapet, directing runners. Her face glistened with sweat and frost, tears freezing at lashes, though she did not seem to cry. The left line buckles, she reported, voice flat but eyes wide. If they break, the dead will surround the Ringfort. Jon squeezed her shoulder. Hold here, I need to push out. She nodded once, and he vaulted stairs two at a time, emerging into Maelstrom. Ghost bounded ahead, lunging at a white in boiled leather. Jaws tore head from shoulders. Jon followed, Longclaw cleaving through torso, obsidian splinters fracturing vertebrae. He pressed through jostling shield wall, sensing men stiffen at his passing. Some cheered, voices hoarse, as if the very sight of Stark in black steel gave them new breath. A shrill ululation rolled across valley, the Dothraki war cry. From western slope they surged, rocks flashing orange in dawn light. Torches of pitch-soaked brush bound to lances ignited as they galloped. Fire sweeping across weapons like comet tails. They smashed into undead flank. Flame-wreathed blades sliced white necks. Horses trampled skeletal skulls to powder. For minutes, the tide of dead wavered. John sighted one of the undead mammoths lumbering behind front lines, two white archers strapped to howdah atop its shoulders. If he could bring it down, the horde's center might fracture. He wove through melee until he reached a scorpion whose crew lay slain. He grabbed the crank, heaving. Ghost guarded behind, fending off whites. But John needed another pair of hands. "Hold!" a voice barked. Brienne of Tarth strode through press, shield on arm, sword Oathkeeper dripping blue ichor. Without preamble, she seized winch, rotating mechanism until bolt cocked. Together they loaded a dragonglass-dipped shaft far longer than any spear. Brienne sighted along crude iron sights. "Higher!" John shouted. She adjusted. "Now!" She triggered release. The bolt screamed across field, trailing a thin whistle. It struck Mammoth's left eye socket, burying deep into brain. The monstrous beast bellowed, legs buckling, crashed sideways, crushing dozens of whites. The howdah archers flailed before falling beneath their mount. A cheer rippled. John clasped Brienne's forearm. "Thank you." She nodded, eyes already scanning for next target. "Stay alive, my lord." Overhead, Balerion and the ice WRM clashed again. Their jaws locked, a contest of raw power. Frost spread along Balerion's snout. Flame leaked between fangs. Valaros stood in stirrups, one hand pressed to Dragon's nape, chanting words swallowed by wind. The WRM lashed tail like a frozen whip, striking Balerion's flank. But the black dread clenched jaws, wrenching sideways. A crunch of ice, a spray of shattered scales, and the WRM's left wing tore free at the joint. Plummeted, shrieking. John craned neck as it spiraled, trailing a blizzard of crystal shards. The creature smashed into valley slope, carving ravine. Whites scattered beneath avalanche of ice and stone. For a heartbeat, the air stilled. Then a roar shook the world. Drogon diving from cloud line, Daenerys leaning forward, face set. Drogon's fire, bright and hungry, poured into the crater. Steam geysered skyward. Cracks spidered across the WRM's torso. Regal followed, flame emerald and gold. Ice melted, refroze, exploded. From Ringfort parapet, Sansa watched with hand clasped to mouth as the ice WRM's body convulsed, then shattered. No longer resisting, limbs fracturing into glacier chunks that slid and tumbled until only a blackened core remained, thrumming blue before sputtering dark. A staccato hush rippled through undead ranks. For the first time, their advance hesitated. John seized moment. "Forward!" he roared. Horns echoed. Northmen surged. Wildlings pressed. Unsullied stepdrag pivot, creating angle to funnel whites into narrowing pocket. Dragonglass stakes reclaimed ground as snow melted into slush mixed with ash. On ridge, the Night King still sat astride skeletal horse now that his mount was destroyed. He studied battlefield with expressionless calm, then lifted both arms. Blue mist radiated outward, swirling above dead bodies, both white and freshly slain living. John's stomach sank. "Archers, target him," he shouted. Arrows launched but clattered against invisible barrier. Bodies began to rise. New whites, still wearing stark colors, still bearing wounds fresh. John watched a young woman from Bear Island stand, eyes blue, throat slashed but no longer bleeding. She turned to attack comrades. The line shuddered. "No!" John sprinted, hacking through whites to reach raising corpses. But it spread faster than blade could fell. Davos signaled horns. Rankers fell back from infected sections, forming kill pockets where they lured and pinioned new whites between dragonglass stakes and flanking pikes. Valaros angled Balerion toward the Night King. Flame roared again, white-hot, but as before, fire washed over shimmering field. The Night King raised his spear slowly, as though savoring. He drew back, aiming not at dragons but at the valley floor near Ringfort. John followed Tip's line toward Sansa. "No!" John's shout drowned in roar as the spear flew, a streak of ice lightning. Balerion banked, but physics of mass delayed. The spear struck parapet, pulverizing stone. Sansa pitched backward, disappearing in blast cloud. John's heart stopped. He raced, muscles screaming, leaping torn earth. Ghost bounded after. Debris rained, stone shards, splinters, charred wood. John reached parapet breach. A smoking crater gaped. He vaulted, scanning. Rubble shifted, a cough sounded. He scrambled, shoving masonry aside. There Sansa pinned beneath archbeam. Blood seeped down temple. John heaved timber free, dragging her into shelter of archway. Her eyes fluttered open. She exhaled pain. "Just a scratch," she lied. John pressed hand to her brow. Relief flooded chest. But above, the Night King readied second spear, this time aimed at Balerion's wounded wing. Dragons wheeled, but dragging spear would drop Valaros. Daenerys dove on Drogon, crossing path of spear as it loosed. Drogon racked wings, flame roaring. The spear and flame collided. A deafening explosion. Ice shards vaporized. Shards pelted valley like razor hail. Drogon shrieked, wounded but alive. The Night King's face contorted. Anger? The faintest crack in mask of ice. Across ridge crest, a new sound arose. Deep, resonant horn not of Stark nor wildling make. From the far western approach, banners appeared. White stag on gold, flayed man reversed on cross of red, sunburst of Arryn, green kraken of pike. Armies from the Vale, the Riverlands, the Reach, even ironborn ships beached and raiders charging inland. At their head, Davos's raven ships had ferried men behind lines overnight. And among them, armored in steel half-plate, riding a great destrier, came Jaime Lannister bearing a Stark direwolf pennon. Jon stared, disbelief mingling with desperate gratitude. The newcomers crashed into undead flank with timing born of miracle. Knights of the Vale lowered lances tipped with dragonglass. Arrows from Tully longbows rained. The tide shifted visibly. Tyrion, atop parapet sputter of a half-ruined tower, punched fist skyward. "The realm still answers," he shouted hoarse. The Night King rotated on skeletal mount, surveying this encirclement. He raised both arms again. A keening wind blew. The clouds overhead churned like black oceans. Snow thickened to near whiteout. Toxic cold rolled across battlefield, frosting armor, numbing limbs. Men stumbled, swords sluggish in hands. Whites pressed in renewed frenzy, invigorated by their master's wrath. Jon sensed a moment hanging by a silk thread. If they faltered now, cold would devour warmth, and hope freeze forever. He stood upon broken parapet, lifted long claw high, voice cracking but strong. "For the dawn," he bellowed. "Stand! Stand with me!" His cry echoed along fort walls, across trench lines, through ridges where new allies joined. Horns answered Vale, Reach, Storm's End. Dragons roared overhead, flames swathing across whites, painting snow with molten rivers. Below, Ghost pounced onto a white giant's knee, sinking fangs before twisting away as dragonglass arrows peppered the colossus. Brienne led a knot of knights into breach, shield raised to protect wounded. Gendry swung hammer once forged for the hound, shattering skulls with Smith's fury. Yet the Night King pressed forward, riding now toward the ring fort gate, blue eyes locked on Jon. Frost formed at his horse's hooves, each step freezing ground so solid obsidian stakes cracked under temperature drop. Soldiers fell back, parting before this wave of absolute cold. Jon stepped onto rampart overlooking gate, long, claw poised. Davos climbed beside him, gripping a dragonglass dagger. "We can't let him breach," Davos said. "He collapses morale." Jon inhaled, fog plume turning to glittering crystals that drifted, weightless, around them. "This ends," he whispered. Valaros's voice, amplified by some unknown sorcery, boomed across valley. "Jon Snow, the hour is now. Claim the flame." Jon looked skyward. Balerion hovered overhead despite injured wing, Valaros standing astride. The Dragon Lord hurled downward a small obsidian cylinder, an ancient Valyrian dragonbinder horn, etched with runes that glowed ember red. It tumbled, landing at Jon's feet with a hiss, half-melting snow. Jon stared, throat tight. To blow it would mean bonding with flame, risking soul and life as legends warned. But without it, the Night King would never falter. Davos's gaze locked on Jon's. "Do it, lad." The gods chose their champion. Jon knelt, fingers curling around Horn's smooth surface. Heat pulsed, searing gloves, thrilling marrow. He raised it to lips. Between heartbeats he smelled summer roses, heard Lyanna's voice, saw dragons circling Balerion spires, heard the crack of a newborn's cry. All converged into this breath. He blew. The sound that erupted was no sound at all but raw primordial vibration. It resonated through bones, through stone, through the very air, bending reality. All who heard felt hearts synchronize, living, beating as one drum. Dragons shrieked, halting mid-flight. Even the ice in Night King's veins seemed to quaver. A column of red-gold light flared from Horn's mouth, spiraling into sky. It split clouds, revealing a sliver of sun. The light washed over Balerion, Drogon, Regal. Their eyes ignited with new intensity. They turned toward Jon as fledglings to Broodlord. Jon felt furnace blaze within chest. Longclaw's steel glowed faintly, runes long unseen revealed along fuller. The cold around him recoiled. He leapt from parapet onto charred ramp of collapsed tower, sliding into snow, landing in crouch before Night King's path. The undead monarch slowed, tilting head. Within his eyes flickered, not surprise, but interest. Jon rose, sword in both hands. The horn's echoes still shimmered. Around, Whites paused mid-attack, uncertain. Rows of living soldiers looked on, breaths held. Night King dismounted with eerie grace, spear twirling. Ground cracked under each step, frost spiderwebbing. He halted a sword's length from Jon. Silence. Jon spoke first, voice low but resonant. "This world belongs to the living." Night King lifted one skeletal brow ridge. He extended spear in salute, an ancient warrior's respect, then lunged. The duel commenced, ice versus Balerion steel lit by inner fire. Spear thrust, sword parried. Frost burst where spear scraped ground. Sparks flared where steel kissed. Jon pivoted, footwork honed by knights on Castle Black's yard. Yet the Night King moved with inhuman swiftness, gliding on sheets of ice manifesting beneath boots. They circled, exchange after exchange ringing like crystal bells struck by hammers. Above, dragons circled, but none intervened. They sensed the sanctity of this combat. Soldiers formed impromptu perimeter, living and undead alike held at bay by forces unseen. Jon's breath steamed, but warmth inside now shielded him. A downward spear drive hammered his blade. He rolled aside, slash severing tip of Night King's pauldron. Shards of ice clattered. Night King hissed. Blue wisps trailed wound but instantly refroze. He spun spear but upward, cracking Jon's ribs. Jon staggered back, stars edging vision. But he countered with savage horizontal sweep. Long claw bit into spear shaft. Frost spiderwebbed along blade, but metal held. Jon pressed. He hammered slash after slash, forcing Night King into step-back retreat. Finally, he feinted low, then vaulted inside guard, driving pommel against frost helm. Cracks starred across icy visage. Night King reeled. Jon raised Longclaw two-handed, preparing deathstroke. Then lightning seared sky. A bolt of blue flame whipped from Night King's palm, slamming Jon's chest. Fireless cold spread instantly. Jon gasped as ribs iced under armor, limbs locking. Night King seized opportunity, spear rising. From above, a roar, Balerion plunged, jaws aflame. Night King's eyes widened. He leapt backward as cone of fire blazed where he'd stood, melting ice, freeing Jon from frozen grip. Jon collapsed to knees, breath ragged, but flame's warmth thawed. Night King emerged from Inferno, cloak smoldering but unburnt, spear reformed. His expression still calm, but he glanced skyward, calculating. Drogon and Regal now descended from opposite flanks, triangular formation closing on target. Night King raised arms to conjure shield again, but Horn's resonance flared anew, breaking his focus. The shield shimmered half-formed. Regal unleashed emerald fire. Drogon followed with crimson. Balerion's magma breath layered, three-tone conflagration spiraling. Night King braced, ice radiance colliding against righteous flame. For endless seconds, forces locked. Air thundered, ground trembled. Jon forced aching limbs upright. He staggered forward, holding Longclaw like torch. Flames parted enough for him to see silhouette of Night King within roiling vortex. Shield failing, ice cracking. He sprinted, lungs aflame. At Cyclone's heart, Night King's eyes met his, fury, disbelief. Jon leapt, blade overhead, channeling all heat surging through veins. He cleaved downward. Longclaw struck collarbone gap where cracks spidered. Steel sank, meeting brittle core. A chime like shattering glass echoed. The Night King's form fissured. Blue light poured out, then extinguished. The spear dropped, fracturing. Jon wrenched blade free and dove aside. Night King's body exploded into storm of ice shards, swept away by flaming wind. A shockwave rippled outward. Every white on field froze mid-motion. Blue in their eyes flickered, then snuffed. One by one, they collapsed. Giants, horses, soldiers, mammoths, all clattering into inert heaps. The roar faded, leaving hush broken only by crackle of lingering fires. Snow still fell, but softer now, peaceful, almost forgiving. Jon lay on back, gasping. Sky above cleared, revealing sliver of blue between parting clouds. Dragons glided overhead, triumphant yet weary, flame trailing in gentle embers. Horn's rune glow dwindled, crumbling to ash beside him. Footsteps crunched. Davos knelt, helping Jon sit. 7 hells, the night breathed. You did it. Jon looked around, corpses of whites melting to slush, living soldiers staring in stunned silence. Sansa appeared, face bruised but eyes alight with relief. She knelt, embracing him. Brienne, Tormund, Grey Worm, Gendry, Lyanna. All approached, forming circle. Tyrion arrived last, trembling, tears on cheeks frosting then melting. If songs are still sung in 1,000 years, he murmured, they'll speak of this dawn. Velaros dismounted several paces away, watching Jon with inscrutable expression. He removed helm, silver hair tousled, eyes reflective. The horn obeyed, he said. You are dragon blood proven. Jon rose shakily. The dead, are they gone for good? Without their king, they cannot rise anew, Velaros replied. But winter will still linger. The living must mend what was broken. Exhaustion washed over Jon like warm tide. He sheathed Longclaw, then reached for Velaros' forearm. Thank you, he said simply. Velaros inclined head. My purpose was to shepherd flame to where it must burn. Now it belongs to you and the queen. He nodded toward Daenerys circling on Drogon overhead. Rule it wisely. As medics fanned across field tending wounded, and Northmen began stacking white remnants for burning, Jon looked to rising sun at last cresting ridge. Its rays ignited frost into diamonds, reflecting off still smoldering dragonglass like promise of renewal. He felt weight of Horn's ashes in pocket, reminder of price paid. The Battle of Blackreach had ended, but dawn's first light revealed a world forever changed. One where dragons soared not as tyrants of fire, but guardians of fragile breath. Where a bastard of Winterfell and a queen of storm might guide realms into uncertain spring. Around him, voices rose in hesitant cheer that built into thunderous roar, an exhalation of deliverance long denied. Jon closed eyes, letting sound wash over. Behind eyelids he saw not war, but fields thawing, children laughing, ravens soaring across blue skies free of snow. He breathed deep, sensing faint scent of pine beneath smoke. For the first time since boyhood, Jon Snow believed the world might yet be worth saving. Not for prophesy or throne, but for simple warmth of sun on skin after longest night. And somewhere high above, Balerion wheeled into sunlight, black scales glimmering gold, and let loose a roar that echoed to the farthest reaches of the north, proclaiming to gods and men alike that the night was over. Snowmelt dripped from the ring fort's shattered battlements in a slow, rhythmic patter. Tiny rivulets tracing paths through soot and broken stone, carving miniature canyons in the ash-smeared snowdrifts that had accumulated during the long night. The battlefield beyond Blackreach lay eerily still beneath a sky newly scrubbed of cloud, the emergent sun bathing the valley in pale gold. Steam wavered over dark patches where dragonfire had fused earth and bone into glassy obsidian slag. Wind rustled tattered banners and carried the mingled odors of char, blood, and warming pine. Jon Snow stood at the lip of a shallow crater near the ringfort's collapsed gate, flexing stiff fingers around the hilt of Longclaw. Every joint complained. A dull ache throbbed behind his eyes from the horn blast and the final exertion of the duel. Yet a fragile calm gathered within his chest, like the hush that follows a thunderclap when wild things dare to breathe again. Around him, men and women set the valley to rights. Stark bannermen dragging corpse-littered sledges toward pyres, unsullied stacking shields into neat pyramids, wildlings hacking apart the larger ice-clotted remnants to ensure no latent spark of necromancy lingered. Closer to the ridge, gouts of green flame still danced atop smoldering piles where wildfire jars had shattered. Davos supervised bucket relays, directing men to shovel snow onto any embers that threatened to spread. Gendry and his smiths quenched steaming scorpion bolts in troughs for salvage. Near a flattened artillery tower, Brienne and Podrick coordinated the makeshift infirmary. Tents of repurposed sailcloth, wounded lying on beds of pine boughs, Maester Wolkan moving from patient to patient with poultices reeking of garlic and burnt honey. For many, the battle remained an open wound of disbelief. Victory won, yet minds unable to release the tension of annihilation narrowly averted. Whispers followed Jon wherever he went. Some called him Dragonlord Reborn, others the Wolf King. Others still murmured the old title prophesied in half-remembered tales. Azor Ahai. He took none of it to heart. Titles meant little beside the simple fact that the world yet turned beneath a living sun. He turned as soft footfalls crunching snow announced Sansa's approach. Bruises marbled her cheek, and her left arm rested in a sling of gray linen, but her poise was unbowed. Ghost trotted at her heel, white coat spattered with gray soot speckles. She stopped beside Jon, tracing his gaze across the valley. "It's quieter than I imagined," she remarked, voice low, almost reverent. Jon nodded, watching a line of free folk hoist an enormous rib cage from one of the undead giants onto a lumber sled. They fought in silence. Seems fitting that silence marks their passing. He flexed his sore shoulder where frostbite had blistered beneath armor. "How is the tally?" "High," Sansa admitted. "Higher than any of us hoped, lower than we feared. A third of the North's levies fell, a quarter of the Vale Knights. The Unsullied lost fewer. Grey Worm's discipline saved many." Her eyes flicked toward the medical tents. "But wounds? We may never know how many will survive winter's infection, even with the Maester's salves." Jon exhaled. "We burn every white corpse by sundown, spread the ashes, salt the earth if we must. I'll not risk the Night King's sorcery finding a way back." "Already in motion," she replied. Ghost nosed her hand. She scratched behind his ear. "Daenerys waits for you at council. They're gathering beside the heart tree." Jon glanced to the Godswood Ridge where the white trunk of an ancient oak-like weirwood rose, its red leaves fluttering. "Thank you." Sansa hesitated. "You'll need to speak to them about the horn," she said, voice softer. "Some think you wield it, others fear it." Jon's thumb brushed the shaft of the broken dragonbinder now slung at his belt in a leather loop. The outer rings had cracked after the last note, runes dulled to dull gray. He suspected it could never sound again without shattering entirely. "I don't even know what it truly is," he admitted. Valaros gave no name. Her expression shifted, part gratitude, part concern. "Then name it yourself," she said. "Names tame fear." She turned away, cloak trailing bloody snow. Jon watched her depart before heading toward the Godswood. The path wound through charred tree stumps and discarded shields. Soldiers bowed heads or offered weary salutes as he passed. Near the ridge crest, the scent of resin and fresh-hewn spruce replaced charred meat, a welcome breath of life. The gods would clearing opened ahead. Valaros leaned against a tumulus stone, cloak washed clean, silver hair cascading. Daenerys stood with arms folded. Drogon crouched behind like a shadowed mountain. Rhaegal perched on a nearby crag, grooming torn wing membranes. Tyrion, Varys, patched from his covert arrival on borrowed Vale ships, and Missandei gathered in a loose semicircle around a crude wooden table where maps of Westeros lay pinned by daggers. As Jon entered, conversation hushed. He inclined his head. "Your Grace," he greeted Daenerys. Her violet eyes softened. "Lord Snow, or shall I say King in the North and Dragon?" A faint quirk of lips, half jest, half awe, tugged her mouth. "I saw you fall, then rise again in the flame." Jon shook his head. "I'm no king. I'm a soldier who survived because others bought me seconds with their lives." He set a hand on the edge of the table. "But we have more to decide. The dead are gone. The living remain, and the living squabble." Varys spread delicate fingers over a parchment thick with sigils. "Word of what transpired here will travel faster than ravens," he said. "Even now, Queen Cersei Lannister sits on the Iron Throne, uncertain whether dragons are myth or menace. When she learns 3 fly with unified purpose, and the dead menace is ended, she will act. The question is how." "Desperately," Tyrion supplied. He tapped Casterly Rock's mark. "The gold mines are dry, the Iron Bank impatient, the Reach restless. Yet desperation breeds cruelty and cunning." His gaze shifted to Valaros. "And you, my lord? What is your part now that your charge is fulfilled?" Valaros's silver eyes reflected leaf-filtered sunlight. "The world's axis has shifted. My duty was to guide the Black Dread where destiny required. Now I am free to choose my own course, though dragons seldom fly aimless." He looked down at the cracked horn on Jon's belt. "The horn's resonance has latched to your blood. While it lasts, even broken, you share breath with Balerion and his kin. Should you call, they will come." Daenerys's brow furrowed. "Dragons answer only Targaryen blood. Yet my ancestors never spoke of such a horn." "They feared it," Valaros explained. "It was forged in the Doom's fires to command, but its use exacts cost. One blast weakens the bond between beast and will. Another might devour the caller's soul." Jon risked everything. Jon swallowed. "It won't sound again. Whatever power lived within burned out." He met Daenerys's gaze. "Your dragons are yours alone." She studied his face. "Dragons choose more than one rider sometimes." A flicker of memory passed behind her eyes. Visions of Valyria, of Aegon and his sisters. "But that is for later." Grey Worm jogged up trail, saluting. "My queen." Scouts report Lannister outriders spotted half-day south along King's Road. Small numbers. Perhaps they flee. His eyes shifted to Jon. "Our men need rest." Jon inclined. "Let them dig in. If Cersei sends an army, she'll march slow with wagons and siege towers. Snow drifts on the King's Road will hamper more than these conditions hamper us." Tyrion frowned at the map. "But while we linger, the North bleeds resources. Winterfell stores cannot feed all these combined hosts for long." Sansa's clear voice drifted from behind Jon. She'd returned without his notice. "We have grain in deeper reserves beneath the Carhold granaries and Last Hearth." The Umbers and Karstarks pledged their carts. She stepped into circle. "But only if you, Daenerys Stormborn, recognize their lordships and swear not to strip the North of men." Daenerys assessed her, weighing the measured tone. "I have no desire to strip anything except tyranny," she said. "If the North stands with me, its lords retain their rights." Sansa nodded once. "Then they'll send grain." She shifted eyes to Valaros. "And you? Where do you hail from that no Maester scroll mentions?" Valaros's lips curved in an enigmatic half-smile. "From ashes no map records." He pushed off stone. "But I will answer truth. I was born in the shadow of the 14 Flames 3 centuries before Valyria's doom. When the cataclysm came, I fled west across the narrow sea with naught but a hatchling who became Balerion. I watched old Valyria crumble, I watched the rise of Aegon, his conquest, his fall. I have worn many faces and names, guiding, never ruling. He spread arms as though inviting judgment. Anachronism, perhaps, yet purpose matters more than age. Silence bowed the grove. Even Drogon paused mid-chuff, cocking head. Tyrion cleared throat. A 300-year-old dragon rider wandering Westeros unnoticed? Even I cannot fully swallow it, though given the past year I'll try. Valaros chuckled, a sound like distant bells. Time weaves illusions. I've slept in amber dreams. The world changed upon each waking. Jon steadied breath. If that is truth, help us navigate what comes next. Dragons alone won't win hearts. Daenerys raised chin. We must march south. The 7 kingdoms have one throne, but now 2 rulers by claim. War is inevitable. Not if war breaks before it reaches King's Landing, Sansa argued. Cersei rules through fear. If her bannermen see 3 dragons and the combined North, Riverlands, Vale, reach, they may abandon her without fight. Varys nodded. The small folk tire of bloodshed. Famine stalks the crownlands. Open gates may greet liberators bearing bread. Grey Worm's jaw set. But Cersei will not yield. She will burn her city before surrender. Jon rubbed the bridge of his nose. I saw that possibility in the fire King's Landing as pyre. We cannot allow history another massacre. Daenerys's gaze hardened. Then what do you propose? Send envoys, Jon said. Not to Cersei, she'd kill them, but to her bannermen. Offer terms. Amnesty for houses who pledge peace, land and grain for small folk, representation in a new council of lords. He placed finger on Riverlands. Edmure Tully can rally river lords. The Tyrell and Hightower remnants in Old Town may listen if we guarantee grain ships. Dorne may side with anyone against Lannister rule. Tyrion tapped his chin. Leverage our story. We saved the realms from the Night King. Show them proof. These melted shards, the dead remnants slewing into ash. His gaze drifted to crackling funeral pyres visible over treetops. No ruler can maintain power if her subjects know she sat idly while ice demons marched. Valaros folded arms. Rationale and mercy will sway many, but not Cersei. She values bloodline and vengeance above all. He surveyed faces. When you march south, she will unleash wildfire caches buried since the Mad King's reign. Only swift infiltration can stop her. Jon recalled Bran's visions, whispers in Old Town of hidden caches under September of Baelor's ruins, beneath the dragon pit. Then we infiltrate first. Daenerys tilted head. How? Valaros's gaze shifted to Sansa. With Shadow and Wolf, he knelt, drawing circles in melting snow. At center, he placed a small stone representing King's Landing. North, he etched a direwolf. East, a 3-headed dragon. West, a stag. South, a sunspear. A 4-pronged approach, he explained. Stark forces feint along Blackwater Rush. Draw Cersei's armies outward. Dragons hold skies but do not strike. Meanwhile, a small infiltration team enters through forgotten smuggler tunnels beneath Rhaenys' hill. He looked at Davos, who had joined quietly. Smugglers know the way. Davos grimaced. I've slipped those tunnels once or twice. They change each decade. But if the currents don't smash us against pilings, we might surface in the cellar of the dragon pit. Valaros continued. There, the team sabotages wildfire stores, cuts fuse lines. If caches cannot ignite, Cersei loses her ace. He brushed snow away. Then armies encircle city, offer parley. No massacre necessary. Daenerys exhaled. You'd risk few to save many. Jon met her gaze. It's worth the risk. Tyrion spread palms. I volunteer. If anyone can navigate those tunnels and talk sense should we be discovered, it's me. A wry smile. Besides, Lannister gold once paid for half those passageways. Sansa rested hand on her belt dagger. And I've been prisoner in the Red Keep. I know secret halls. Jon blanched. You just survived this battle. I will survive the next, she said. Besides, if this plan hinges on surprise, No one expects the Lady of Winterfell beneath their floors. Valaros nodded approvingly. Then choose 8 others of varied skill: stealth, sorcery, lockpick, sword. Sail at dusk tomorrow. Jon inhaled cold pine air. So soon? There is no later, Valaros said simply. The realm needs harvest planted, roads cleared, villages rebuilt. The longer rulers war, the more small folk starve. Daenerys rested a palm on Drogon's scaled forelimb. Very well. I will marshal the host, march along King's Road, but hold a day's march north of King's Landing until your signal. Jon nodded. Torch a green firework from the battlements when wildfire is safe. Dragons will circle as sign of cease hostilities. Then we demand surrender. Agreement felt fragile as first ice of winter, but it was forged nonetheless. That evening, funeral pyres dotted the valley like glowing isles in a sea of shadow. Stacks of timber groaned as flames devoured resin-rich pine, sparks swirling upward to meet a vault of stars. The living gathered in rings around each pyre, free folk murmuring to the old gods, southern knights singing half-forgotten hymns, unsullied standing silent vigil for fallen brothers. The mingled languages formed a low hymnal of grief and gratitude. Jon stood before the largest pyre, where Theon Greyjoy, Jorah Mormont, Lyanna Mormont's body wrapped in bare pelts, and hundreds more lay side by side. Arya had arrived from Winterfell's inner walls, face smudged with ash, eyes bright with unshed tears. She took Jon's hand. They fought like wolves, she whispered. They'd have liked that. He squeezed gently. They live in every breath tomorrow owes them. Together they stepped back as torches were set. Flames roared, heat forcing those gathered to retreat several paces. Sansa clasped Bran's wheelchair handles. Bran's eyes reflected fire, distant, seeing something beyond flickering tongues, perhaps the path of those souls joining the weirwood net. Tormund guzzled a drinking horn, then flung it into blaze. To the dead who taught us to live, he bellowed. A ragged cheer followed, sorrow and joy inseparable. High above, dragons wheeled slowly, their forms jet-black silhouettes against starlight. Even Balerion glided gently, wounded wingline now wrapped in salve-soaked canvas stitched by dragon riders Valaros had summoned from distant exile. The beasts made no sound, as though paying respect to mortal kin. Valaros stood alone at the wood's edge, eyes half-lidded. Jon approached. You lost people too, he said. I lost memories, Valaros replied, voice soft. Time erases names, but ashes remind me of each. Jon studied the man. Immortal guardian who had shepherded dragons through ages. What will you do after King's Landing? Valaros tilted head, considering. Perhaps return east, to ruins of Valyria. See what new life grows out of doom. He smiled faintly. Or perhaps remain until your child learns to walk skies. Jon's cheeks warmed beneath soot. Child. Prophecy rarely ends with battle, Valaros said cryptically, strolling away before Jon could inquire further. Morning dawned clear and bitterly cold. In Winterfell's great hall, roof beams repaired yet still smelling of smoke. 10 figures assembled as the infiltration party. Jon donned a tight-fitting jerkin of black boiled leather, lighter than armor. Arya stood to his left, wearing gray tunic, needle at her hip. Brienne, surprisingly swift in lighter chain, insisted on joining as sword. Her loyalty to Sansa would not brook protest. Tyrion wore a midnight cloak, daggers hidden in belt. Davos carried maps and smugglers' lanterns. Missandei volunteered for her knowledge of high Valyrian engravings rumored to mark old maintenance tunnels beneath the Dragon Pit. 2 silent brothers from the faceless Temple of Bravos, brought south by Arya's secret contacts, would serve as scouts. Finally, Gendry hefted a hammer of Valyrian steel reforged from Eddard Stark's greatsword ice, as potent symbol and weapon. Before they departed, Daenerys entered, barefoot on flagstones still cold from night. She walked directly to Jon, cupped his cheek. Be careful, she whispered. I have lost much. I would not lose you. Jon rested forehead against hers. Keep your armies intact. When you see the signal, come no sooner, no later. She nodded, eyes gleaming. Drogon's rumble drifted through open doors, impatient. They descended to the Godswood, where Valaros waited beside a low, sleek galley painted charcoal, an old smuggler's vessel named Shade of Dawn. With sails furled and oars muffled in wool, the boat slid down icy channel toward White Knife River mouth. The infiltration party boarded, Ghost leaping lightly into prow before Jon could protest. Davos grinned. Every ship needs a wolf. Grey Worm saluted from dock, unsullied lining pier in silent respect. Sansa raised a hand from rampart. Shade of Dawn slipped into the current, passing beneath Winterfell's high bluff. Frost-rimmed reeds whispered along hull. Jon stood at stern, watching castle fade behind bend. All he had known of home now lay behind him, yet a deeper calling thrummed within chest. Less prophecy, more hope that after so long adrift, he might help shape a gentler world. Night fell by the time they reached White Harbor. Lord Wyman Manderly's harbor master discreetly guided them into a secluded inlet where the flotilla of Vale ships waited. Galleys named Lady's Honor and Maiden's Shield transferred supplies: dried cod, barley sacks, barreled apples. Tyrion oversaw loading while Brienne inspected ropes. Gendry hammered fresh nails into oarlocks. Arya scouted dockside warehouses for extra tar pitch. Jon sought Maester Wolkan for Raven scrolls. Messages penned to river lords and Dornish princes pleading for envoys to meet on neutral ground near Storm's End. They set sail long before dawn, hugging coastline southward. Gulls wheeled, salt stiffened hair. The sea smelled free of dread. Ghost lay curled in Jon's bunk, fur peppered with flakes of dried salt. On deck, Davos steered by lantern hooded and shielded from watchtowers along distant cliffs. "Tides favor us," he murmured, voice low. "We'll make the Blackwater mouth in 3 days if the wind holds." Jon rested arms on rail. "Cersei will have watchers at every lighthouse. We slip past at night, lay anchor beneath the cliffs, and row with tide on new moon." Davos nodded, but his gaze lingered on Jon. "You've changed." Jon frowned. "Battle changes all." "Not battle," Davos clarified. "Flame, the horn. There's light in your eyes, like embers that refuse to cool." Jon recalled the moment of resonance, warmth fusing with marrow. At night he heard faint echoes, dragons breathing, wings brushing cloud, and he could almost sense their dreams. Balerion recalling Valyrian skies, Regal chasing scaled prey through emerald jungles, Drogon basking in desert sun. The connection was distant but undeniable, a low-key hum. "I feel alive," Jon admitted, "as if I woke from shallow dream into truth. But truth weighs heavier than dream." Davos smiled ruefully. "Wait until you rule, lad. Then you'll pray for dreams again." Jon's admonition about ruling died on his tongue. He looked instead at star patterns glittering above waves. "Tell me about the smuggler tunnels again." Davos described labyrinthine waterways snaking under the city, storm drains connecting to disused cellars, routes once exploited by flea-bottom thieves and black marketeers. He explained subtle currents, the echo of hidden sluice gates timed to tides, the stench thick enough to gag seasoned sailors. Tyrion joined, contributing knowledge of secret passages under Maegor's holdfast, escape routes Tywin Lannister had sealed after Robert's rebellion but never fully destroyed. Arya listened, mapping paths in her mind. "Every castle has a back door," she said. "You only need to look at it like a mouse." Brienne's broad shoulders tensed. "I pray this mouse doesn't meet a lion." Tyrion chuckled. "This lion has learned to hide his roar." Wintermoon's sliver hung above Blackwater Bay by the time Shade of Dawn drifted into Mauve Estuary. Fog clung to water like gauze. Far above, the broken hulk of Stag's Horn Lighthouse loomed, its beacon dark. Cersei lacked oil reserves to keep all lights burning. On distant shoreline, torch dots lined ramparts of King's Landing's northern sea walls. Golden Lannister banners drooped windless. Davos cut sail, whispering orders. Oars dipped silently, feathering strokes moving vessel through fog. Ghost stood at prow, ears angled, eyes reflecting faint star gleam. Missandei muttered under breath, high Balerion incantation for still tides. Brienne's gauntlet fingers toyed with prayer beads from the maiden's September. Hours later, they reached shallows beneath Rhaenys' hill, where tides sucked outward. Davos directed them into cavern mouth, hidden behind algae-slicked boulders. Echoing darkness swallowed them. Torches hooded in green smoked. Rats skittered along stone ledges, startled by foreign footfalls. The cavern funneled into a brick culvert half-flooded. They waded waist-deep. Tyrion's lantern illuminated crumbling mortar etched with Balerion glyphs, maintenance markings mapping tunnels decades before. Missandei traced one with finger. "Dragon pit vault ahead," she whispered. They navigated narrow corridor where salt crystals glittered on walls. Arya scouted ahead, silent as breath. She paused at junction, signaled. 2 guards in rusty plates snoozing on crates of grain. Brienne removed gauntlets, crept forward. 1 heavy pommel knock, 2. Guards slumped unconscious. Arya sliced rope, bound wrists. They entered vast cistern filled with pillars supporting cracked ceiling. Wooden scaffolds leaned along sides where repair crews had abandoned work for war budgets. In center rose circular dais beneath an iron grate, the dragon pit cellar. Jon gazed upward. Faint shafts of moonlight speared through cracks, revealing dust motes. Tyrion knelt by a rusted iron wheel embedded in floor. "Old sewer sluice," he muttered. He turned it. Gears groaned. Grate slid aside with reluctant growl. A warm draft smelling faintly of pitch wafted from shaft. Wildfire vaults are 5 floors up behind a false wall near gallery. Missandei produced slender rod, inscribed with Balerion runes. "This is rebel key forged by Grand Maester Hythrin centuries ago. It can open the vault door if mechanism still functions." Tyrion arched a brow. "You're full of surprises," he murmured. Gendry set hammer across back, climbed iron rungs first. Jon followed. Arya, Brienne, Tyrion, Missandei, the faceless brothers, Davos ascended. Ghost looked up, huffed, then bounded upward, claws gripping rungs as if born to climb. They emerged into stone corridor lined with collapsed arches. Torch sconces held rotted stubs. The smell of wildfire grew. Acrid, metallic tang like copper and rotten citrus. Arya gestured left. Footsteps receded beyond bend. Patrol. They pressed to wall as 2 Lannister soldiers trudged past, complaining about rats chewing boot leather. Once gone, party advanced, every step measured. False wall appeared as ordinary brick, but Missandei pointed out mortar gap shaped like draconic rune. She inserted key. Mechanism clicked. Bricks parted in iris pattern, revealing narrow passage lined with iron jars sealed in lead. Label chits dangled on tarnished chains, many snapped. Within gloom, mounds of wildfire pulsed faint lime. Tyrion's face paled. "There's enough here to immolate half the city." Brienne exhaled slow. "How do we disarm?" Missandei unrolled parchment diagrams. Jars contain internal agitation charges triggered by fuse network linking to central ignite chamber beneath the September foundation. Sever conduits, detach rumblers. Then puncture top jar seals with quicklime to neutralize viscerate compound. Gendry grunted. "I'll smash what needs smashing." They split into pairs, Gendry and Davos severing fuse lines, Arya and 1 faceless brother ascending to second vault. Tyrion guiding Missandei in neutralizing jar seals, Jon and Brienne guarding corridor. Ghost paced. Hours passed. Delicate work of cutting, draining, burying quicklime. Sweat beaded despite cold corridors. A single spark could vaporize them. At one point, Gendry snapped tongs removing fuse. It clanged on stone, echoing. They froze, hearts hammering. No guard came. As dawn's faint blush seeped through cracks overhead, final fuse line detached. Missandei wiped brow streaked with green dust. "It is done." Tyrion stepped back. Cersei could still light half a street, but the chain is broken. No chain reaction. Brienne motioned. "Signal." Jon pulled travel pack, revealing small rocket tube, contraption of pyromancer salvage. Iron casing with black powder, tip stuffed with green flare. Gendry lit fuse with flint. They hurried back to great shaft. Jon aimed tube through broken ceiling stone. Whoosh! Rocket streaked upward, vanishing in dark. Seconds later, above King's Landing, a burst of emerald fire blossomed against pink dawn sky, a flower of promise. Miles north along King's Road, Daenerys watched flare from vantage on Cliff Pass. Her breath caught. She raised arm. Trumpets blared. Banners unfurled. Dragons shrieked overhead. Ascending. Allied host marched, a river of steel and cloaks flowing south. Vale Knights, Riverland bowmen, Dornish spears, reach levies proud beneath green field. Stark banners led. Grey direwolf on white, Sansa riding beside Bran's wheeled litter on reinforced platform, flanked by armored guards. Grey Worm commanded Unsullied at vanguard, their phalanx blades glinting. Daenerys mounted Drogon, gaze fixed on distant capital. "Fly," she whispered. Wings thundered. Balerion rose to her left, Valaros astride, wound bandaged but flight steady. Regal to right, 3 dragons arrowed south, silent promise to both hearts and tyrants. Within Red Keep, Cersei Lannister stared through window slit as dragons approached, flare still fizzling embers above September ruins. Her golden hair fell loose around shoulders. Wine goblet trembled in hand. Qyburn rushed in, pale. "Your Grace." Reports confirm tunnel sabotage. Wildfire fuses severed. Cersei's jaw clenched. Then reload catapults. Dragon killer scorpions line walls. "We hold." Qyburn hesitated. "Half our men deserted last night." Gold cloaks opened gates for fleeing small folk. Cannonade of horns drifted from city outskirts. War horns of northern armies echoing across bay. Cersei dashed goblet, wine splattering marble. "Traitors, where is Euron's fleet?" Scattered at sea, storms swamped 10 ships. Her eyes blazed. "I will not yield." She turned as door swung again. Jaime strode in, golden hand glinting, wearing stark wolf cloak. He halted at contempt glinting in her eyes. "Sister," he said softly. She spat. "You stand with them?" "I stand with the living," he replied. "Open city gates. End this." Cersei laughed, a brittle, thread-thin sound. "Never." She drew dagger, advanced. "If I cannot rule, none shall." She lunged. Jaime parried with golden hand. Steel bit metal, skittering aside. They grappled, decades of shared grief and love boiling. Finally Jaime twisted blade away, but Cersei slashed upward, cutting his cheek. He stumbled. She raised dagger again, but trembled, eyes glistening. Years of paranoia, loss, prophecy cracked facade. Jaime stepped forward, embracing her. "It's over," he whispered. She sagged, sobbing against his chest. Outside, bells tolled. Not for surrender, but by hands of small folk clamoring at bell ropes, demanding peace. By midday, King's Landing's gates creaked open. A hush spread across encircling host. A white banner fluttered atop gatehouse, field of red heart crowned by 7-pointed star, faith's symbol of truce. From behind walls, Lannister soldiers marched out, weapons discarded, led by Ser Bronn wearing white sash of envoy. He approached Grey Worm, knelt. Queen Cersei sues for parley. Grey Worm lowered spear but did not extend hand. "Bring her to Broken Bridge by sunset, unarmed." Bronn nodded, stood. "I'll tell her highness what choice remains." At Broken Bridge, tension coiled thick. On one side, Daenerys, Jon, Sansa, Arya, Tyrion, Varys, Brienne, Davos, Gendry, Dornish Prince Quentyn Martell, Wyman Manderly. On other side, Cersei, flanked by Jaime and Qyburn. The shattered stonework spanned a dry drainage canal outside gates. Dragons perched on crumbling aqueduct above, silent, watchful. Cersei's face was pallid, lips bloodless. She surveyed assembly with haunted eyes. "So the wolf and the dragon join hands," she said. "The North bends knee to foreign queen?" "The North stands for all kingdoms," Jon replied. "We fought the dead. Now we fight to live in peace." Cersei's gaze flicked to Daenerys. "And you?" conqueror or savior? Daenerys spoke evenly. I came to break chains, not to stack bodies. She gestured skyward. Your wildfire is disarmed. Your armies outnumbered. Your people starve. Surrender the throne, face fair trial, and we rebuild 7 kingdoms together. Cersei's shoulders heaved in silent rage. She looked to Jaime, searching, pleading, defiant. He held gaze steady, hand on sword but not drawing. Tyrion stepped forward. Sister, he swallowed. Remember when we were children and dreamed of a golden city where no one feared the night? His eyes glistened. Let that city begin now. Admit defeat, and you may live to see your son's legacy honored in books of peace. Cersei's breath hitched, memory of lost children flickered. She drew herself tall. What terms? Daenerys raised parchment. You abdicate all claim, retire to Great September of Old Town under Septon's guard. Lannister lands transfer to Jaime Lannister as Lord Regent under King's Peace. Gold cloaks reorganized under Council. High Garden Harvest distributes grain. Iron Bank debts honored gradually. Cersei closed eyes, tears escaping. At last she lowered dagger she had concealed in sleeve, dropping it to ground. Very well. A collective exhale rippled. Daenerys extended scroll. Jaime accepted. Qyburn stepped forward but was barred by Grey Worm's spear. Jaime guided Cersei backward toward retinue. As they turned, Cersei glanced at Jon. Unreadable expression, perhaps relief laced with hatred. Then she and entourage retreated toward city. Dragons stretched wings, but remained. Daenerys faced assembled lords. We will convene Council of Kingdoms at Dragon Pit in 3 days. Each region shall send 2 delegates. We will draft a charter of the free realms. A cheer rose, tentative, then swelling. Jon lowered head, overwhelmed. 3 days later, Dragon Pit thrummed with delegates. Arryns, Mandalys, Tarlys, Tyrell cousins, Greyjoys under Asha, Martells, Dothraki calls curious at southern splendor. Bran Stark, three-eyed raven, was carried in by Hodder's kin. His calm presence radiated gravity. The charter discussions lasted hours. Taxation scales, road maintenance levies, restoration funds, representation quotas for commoners. Heated debates flared. Tarlys demanding grain recompense, Greyjoys bargaining for port tariffs, Martells urging abolishment of female inheritance bars. Yet underlying all was knowledge that dragons watched. In twilight recess, Jon wandered broken archways of Dragon Pit alone. Ghost trotted nearby. Steps approached. Daenerys. She slipped fingers through his. You should speak at council, she urged. They look to you. I'm no ruler, he protested for what felt thousandth time. She smiled. You are hope, he sighed, leaning against pillar. After the horn, I feel the dragons' hearts. They're restless, unsettled in city smells. Daenerys laid head to his shoulder. We will find them a sky sanctuary, a dragon haven near Dragonstone perhaps, free of chains. Her hand moved to his chest, resting over heart. And for us? Jon swallowed, turning to face her. I thought the dead my only foe. Now life looms terrifying. He brushed her silver hair. Yet I'm willing. She kissed him, soft, lingering, tasting salt of dried sweat and sea air. Ghost wuffed, circling to lie down. Footsteps again. Valaros emerged from shadows. Forgive intrusion. He bowed. I bring news. Balerion's wound healed. He grows restless to soar beyond these lands. I shall accompany him across sea. Daenerys straightened. You leave so soon? The world no longer needs my guiding hand, he said. It has yours and his. He inclined head to Jon. But before I depart, one gift. He handed small velvet pouch. Jon opened. Inside lay 3 obsidian ovoids, each no bigger than goose egg, shimmering with faint heat. Dragon eggs, Jon whispered. Valaros nodded. Balerion's last clutch. They will hatch only in hearth of harmony. Fire tempered by love, not conquest. He placed hand on Jon's shoulder. Raise them when world forgets fear of dragons, so hope may fly again. Jon felt tears threaten. "Thank you." Valaros stepped back. "I am but steward. Farewell." He whistled. From colonnade, Balerion's colossal head appeared. Golden eyes regarded them gentle now. Valaros climbed aboard. With mighty beat of wings that sent dust swirling, the black dread lifted, shadow crossing courtyard. Lighter than before, he soared above city, turned east towards sunrise blooming rose on horizon, vanished into heavens. Jon and Daenerys watched until spec faded. Wind rustled spectral banners overhead. Jon closed pouch, heart weightless yet heavy with new responsibility. "We will build world for them," Daenerys said. "For all of us," Jon corrected. Hand in hand, they returned to council, where lords argued but listened, where dragons roost on broken domes peacefully, where the future balanced fragile and possible. Years later, in spring's gentle thaw, children of kings landing chased kites across newly planted orchards in city's rebuilt northern ward. The kites were shaped like dragons, black, green, and red. Their strings traced arcs through mild blue sky as laughter echoed among apricot blossoms. On a grassy knoll, an old smuggler with salt-flecked beard carved a small wooden wolf for a wide-eyed girl. Her mother, a former unsullied medic, thanked him in northern tongue she'd learned from her new neighbors. High above on the Red Keep's terrace, Queen Daenerys Stormborn, now simply Lady Protector of the Realm, stood beside King Consort Jon Snow, both garbed in plain wool. They watched the children play, felt warm breeze. Ghosts slept at their feet, muzzle twitching in dreams of chasing deer. Within nursery halls, 3 young dragon hatchlings curled in hearth embers. One midnight blue-streaked silver, one bronze speckled jade, one snow white with pale crimson eyes, purring like thunder muted by distance. Sansa Stark, Regent of the North, visited that day, laughing as Arya told tales of sailing west beyond Sunset Sea with Nymeria's pack sighted along new shores. Tyrion served as first counselor, drafting policies to support free libraries in every town. Brienne commanded the Queen's Guard, training recruits in fields where public gardens bloomed, while Gendry forged plowshares from melted swords. Far across narrow sea, an obsidian fortress rose upon a pillar of smoked glass at the heart of Balerion ruins, no longer haunted but alive with scholars, healers, and dragon keepers rebuilding lost arts. Some claimed they glimpsed Valaros, silver hair gleaming, strolling battlements with Balerion perched atop spire, watching over the sea like sentinel of ages. And in the quiet of night, when stars stretched infinite, Jon sometimes crept to castle roof with Daenerys. Together they looked north where Aurora still shimmered beyond walls' remnants now overgrown with moss. He would rest hand on her belly, soon to bear their first child, feeling gentle flutter inside. In those moments, he felt Horn's phantom resonance. Dragons breathing in unison, world turning, life enduring. No prophecy burned hotter than hope. No flame brighter than love shared by former strangers bound by duty. Snow fell still each winter, but it never again carried dread of armies marching in silence. It lay soft, blanketing fields ready to sprout anew. Children born after long night asked grandparents if the tales of ice demons were true. The elders nodded, then pointed toward scorched glass monuments in black reach glinting under sun, reminders of cost of forgetting. Thus the song of ice and fire resolved not in ashes, but in seed and root, in wings of innocence fluttering above orchards. And when those young dragons took first flight, wheeling over blue water, their shadows rippled across orchards and rooftops, but no one cowered. They lifted faces to sky, eyes shining, for they knew that darkness had been met, and this time, the living chose to kindle warmth instead of fear, forging dawn everlasting. The wind carried laughter, the kites soared, and beyond the horizon, golden light beckoned to futures uncharted, awaiting brave hearts and open hands.